Everything under control, Frith?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Excuse me, sir. Are you supposed to be a schoolmaster?
Oh, no. This is just my old cap and gown.
Certainly makes a very nice costume, sir. And economical, too.
Yes, that was the idea.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. So today I'm joined by Alberto Rizzoli, who is a co-founder of V7. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
All right. So you've studied under the famed Ray Kurzweil. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, I was at a place called Singularity University when the idea and the formation of my previous startup, Aipoly, was happening. And it was 2015. So a very exciting year for AI, in which commercialization of deep learning really started to become viable. And that was also the year in which a ton of acqui-hires happened. Every large Silicon Valley company was looking for a team of bright, young, deep learning, understanding people that could then spearhead the AR arm of these giants. My co-founders, Simon and I, were looking and enthralled by the concept of neural image captioning. And this was work that Google was progressing and several folks there. Ray Kurzweil himself, one of the fathers of AI, was running the program at Singularity. And we thought that this was the most exciting thing to happen to computing yet. So we really wanted to jump into it.
Yeah, that's such an interesting time period. And I remember speaking with those that were very much in the forefront of that period. And I think even just a year or two before some of the deep learning things start to really take off, how they thought that they had achieved a certain amount of, let's say, computation efficiency or a certain capability, but then comes deep learning and it just kind of changed the landscape for a lot of the researchers and academics. Very exciting. Now, you mentioned a prior startup called Aipoly, and that's interesting because of your experience running large, deep neural networks. And I think you guys you're using smartphone CPU, so I'm not sure if that was like a Qualcomm or not. And I wonder if that was a seminal experience for you that helped to launch and shape V7 today.
Yeah, it was indeed. Usually, one entrepreneur's first startup leads to another, and especially in the learnings from one, you can then multiply that impact. And that was the case with Aipoly. We were indeed running we were the first example in the market to run convolutional neural nets on a smartphone CPU. Basically, you could do real-time image identification on the phone, play it like a video or wave your phone around and it would identify objects. And the Aipoly app itself would speak them out loud so that blind people or visually impaired people with very little sight remaining could identify their surroundings and familiarize themselves with their surroundings. This really cool use case led to far more commercially viable use cases coming through from companies that saw the viral explosion of Aipoly. It was an app that served a good cause, and therefore everyone was talking about. And that was a period in my life in which I was on radio every week and on television talking about this technology. But the accessibility space is only an extremely tiny part of the computer vision market. And unfortunately, of the potential impact of that tech, even though it was our favorite because it can be revolutionary. We were approached by several enterprises that would ask us, hey, can you make Aipoly but for this? Or can you make it but for that? And the secret to all of that was, hey, yes, but you need to gather some training data into an organized place. And then we can send it through our training pipeline and train the same neural nets that power Aipoly. We just need to have this pipeline in place for you. And that at scale is what V7 solves, and much more today. But that was the spark that led to the first thought and the first MVP of V7.
Yeah, by the way, the Aipoly story is interesting because I think there was even a spin out of a Korean drama based on a kind of a similar narrative around that kind of AI technology for the disabled. Now, V7 is a kind of interesting play on word because it has reference to the human visual cortex. Can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's a reflection on where our team is coming from. We are effectively all nerds, all the way from the commercial team in sales. We have some people who are really erudite with their studies, all the way from classics and studying ancient Latin for years to folks in the engineering team that are passionate about all kinds of areas of biology as well. So everything in the fields of sciences and STEM and Thrallus. And the visual cortex is one of the inspirations behind deep neural nets. There's 6 areas in the human one, V1 through V6. And we recognize them as understanding more complex information as you go through it. Very similar to the layers of a neural net, which now can be in the hundreds. But as you progress forward, they encompass more and more complex concepts, like what OpenAI microscope reveals. And you can have effectively an Obama neuron that encodes all information related to this person. While at the early layers, you see simple shapes. And we wanted to create a 7th hypothetical layer of the visual cortex that could be used to train any machine and that could enhance the way we understand the world.
Amazing. Now, you started to kind of touch upon this, which is that the different enterprises were coming to you for specific sets of use cases. And you mentioned that it all started with training data sets. Why is labeling training data so challenging? And how is V7 enabling label training data at unsupervised speed?
Yeah, I'm going to steal a quote for this one from Andrej Karpathy, who leads the autopilot efforts at Tesla and has taught a lot of people through a Stanford course who are in my shoes today, which is that when you're doing academic work, you're mostly focusing on models and the data set is fixed because some Stanford group of students have already focused on labeling a bunch of data. That data set has been done, has been completed. And you're identifying dog breeds with a better and better neural net every year. But in industry, the tables are flipped. 80% of your time is spent on the training data because that is effectively the representation of a model's knowledge is the training data. And the training data platform is the library of knowledge that a company's AI has. It's effectively its study material. And, if every time you have a new pupil or a new model, you need to send it through the study course so it can learn from all this training data. It becomes this asset and you're building this huge library, not in the software tool, but actually in the, metaphorical physical form of a library. And it's very effortful to create training data because in many cases, it can't be done only using, say, average user automatic inputs. Self-driving car, for example, will take the steering wheel as training data. Luckily, it has a driver at the helm. And we'll take the acceleration and some of the other parameters that the driver will input. But then it needs a lot more for the perception system to learn. And it needs humans to look into every view of the camera and label every tree, every person, every roadside crossing, everything that could be an obstacle to effectively teach the AI how to deal with every single situation. This is very laborious and strictly necessary. And a platform like ours helps speed it up by working with AIs in the loop and working in tandem between humans and AI so they can speed it up to 90%. This is done by making humans focus on what they're good at, making ultimate decisions, and making AI focus on what they're fantastic at, which is segmenting objects, automatically labeling things, and then leaving to the human to decide what needs to stay and what doesn't need to stay in a specific piece of training data.
Now, there are, of course, others that's working on something similar, but I wonder if you could go a little bit more in depth in terms of what makes your approach, your IP uniquely better positioned.
You may also like our quarterly Astor Perkins event that brings some of the most notable experts and category leading startups in their area of sustainability and human survival on Earth and in space. To register, visit astorperkins.com/events.
Yeah, the companies in our space have enjoyed quite a bit of success lately. There's other players that are now at billion-dollar valuations and doing quite well by providing a lot of services that are the human services that would normally be offered by BPOs are now being offered by tech companies that partner with these BPOs. What V7 offers is a more complete service at the infrastructure level. Not only can anyone automate their own workflow using models from a graphical user interface. You can plug in your own models if you have machine learning teams, but in many cases, data operations engineers will start labeling data, or will have people label data and then automatically train models with one click that will autocomplete a large part of the rest. And this magic experience has been done uniquely well at V7 through a fantastic team of people that we put together. I think one of them is that there's a fantastic change in using a product that truly uses deep learning that starts to feel like magic when it works properly. And I think we really nailed that concept. What we're also focusing a lot on is in centralizing an entire company's training data in one place. And the dataset management aspect of our platform, despite being something that you might think is rather boring, like why don't I store things on AWS S3 and just have everything in folders? But if you're running an organization with hundreds of models and sometimes even hundreds of storage buckets, it can be really hard to create a single library of all of a model's knowledge. And that's been one of our strongest suit compared to any other data labeling platform that generally manages on these small batches of data that comes from a BPO. Hey, we have another 250 images today, and people complete them and then they go back somewhere. Whilst we really try to create more of a CRM experience. So we are what Salesforce is to a company's sales and finance goals, what we are to machine learning. Or if you want to make a reference to GitHub, it's also rather similar. But I think there's something new and exciting happening in the MLOps space. And it's this new third branch of development that's emerging. And I think that's really cool because a lot of great startups will emerge in this ecosystem in the next couple of years.
So I want to first tackle the generalized model that you're referring to that then does most of the heavy lifting. Can you go into a little bit more nuance in terms of how that works? So let's say, for example, you decide to filter, tag, sync a particular training data set specifically around, let's say, buildings or certain assets like cars or other things within a street view. How is that then the system then taking that and then automatically starting to understand what to tag in other types of images?
Yeah, we are a big believer in large generalized models being part of the future of our space. And they don't solve everything well, but they solve everything well enough if you use them in the correct manner. The auto-annotate system of V7 is the name of our generalized model. Is first of all the fastest in the market for the size of images that it supports by almost an order of magnitude. And well, whenever I say this, I also say it by kind of crossing my fingers behind my back because every 6 months the state of the art in deep learning renews. So it's thanks to the people at V7 that this has been kept up to be so good. But what it's effectively able to do is, given any object that you click on or you create a box around, even if it's very loose, the AI will understand the object that you're interested in and then make a perfect segmentation around it. That means basically creating a polygon vector that goes all around the silhouette of a person and then creating the perfect nugget of training data to say, this is a person. It's neatly encompassed, there's no background, and that creates really high quality models on the other end. The advantage of that is first one of time, where creating these segmentations by hand takes a lot, and then one of fatigue as well. a lot of errors that our AIs make are generally because the training data is poorly labeled. And training data tends to be poorly labeled, not because the instructions are misunderstood, but because the person labeling gets tired or bored. And by using these more exciting semi-automated tools, you get a much better quality output. The technical details behind them are quite exciting. It's a very large deep neural net that we train and we update continuously. We have a data set internally that we maintain that is super high quality to try and have it segment virtually any object. And it's holding up pretty well. We love doing sales demos with it because we ask the customer, hey, give us your craziest image in your repository to identify something, and it will detect and segment the object that you're interested in. We've had anything from the X-ray of a hammerhead shark sent to us to, strange defects in fiberglass that may appear during manufacturing. And it has now this general understanding of saliency of a single object.
So that's really interesting. And of course, the key is this neural net that you guys have built that's proprietary. But if you could talk a little bit more in terms of this contextual understanding. So as part of the segmentation, let's say, for example, that you are placing or indicating a box around a tuxedo, in particular the bow tie. But then you're also looking for bow tie shaped things in the context of, let's say, pasta, or maybe shoelaces. So how does the system understand the segmentation and then the context to understand the shape versus what it actually is in terms of final form?
That's where the tandem between the human and the AI takes shape. Auto-annotate will know how to segment an object and find it, but then it's up to you, the human, to name it first. Because a bow tie in pasta to you is a bow tie pasta, but to the Barilla company, it is bow tie number 723 using 50% durum wheat. And so the taxonomy of what we want to identify should really be left to the user, because general understanding of objects by defining a class kind of makes sense in academic, where an armadillo is an armadillo, but to a company that is doing zoology, it's a deeper challenge. And the UX is that you define that is a tuxedo bow tie and the other one is a pasta bow tie, and then you can have a model trained that will then identify these in future examples as this specific class in this specific taxonomy. That's the step 2 that starts to happen when you've labeled a few of these examples, and the system starts to run a bit more on autopilot after the first model is trained.
Got it. So I wonder, that's a really interesting example that you gave, because in that case, the taxonomy or the ontology models for companies are going to be very different depending on the specific organization, but also the sectors that they're in. And of course, what they consider a certain object may mean very different things with a very different set of underlying metadata. Mm-hmm. For your core neural nets, are you absorbing the learnings from those, let's say, customer data in a kind of anonymized fashion? And does that potentially skew things because it becomes very firm or organization specific?
Very good point. It's a very big risk in using customer data for a centralized system, because you're effectively de-anonymizing it by using that taxonomy that the customer defines. So we generally don't. We use only certain metadata that is very abstract to the actual contents of the picture and to the image to understand how something is labeled. And the actual pixels of where an image is, like what an object looks like in an image, can be used in federated learning to train that such an object is related to XYZ. But the risk there is that if you have people defining an endoscope of one medical company and it's got a brand name, and then another medical company labels their endoscope and it suggests them the name of a competitor, that immediately breaks the trust into, hey, what the heck are you guys doing? So we don't use customer data for enhancing the taxonomy knowledge of anything of what we do. And our number one priority, especially when onboarding customers, is that none of their data is actually mixed in any way with that of other customers. It has to be effectively their library and their domain. And within it, they can build enhanced versions of our base model, which is then trained on a whole lot of data that comes from generally Creative Commons, open source sources, and then internal data sets that we maintain ourselves and are able to use for larger domains.
You touched upon something, which is that on the customer side, that they tend to kind of silo things, put things into folders, maybe project-based, but to really get the benefit, they really need to have a centralized place for all this. So does that mean that as part of working with you guys, you would have to create a data mart, data warehouse, or how are you guys plugging in such a way that even if it resides in different systems and repositories, you're effectively creating a virtualized, centralized environment for training purposes?
Don't forget to visit astroperkins.com to register for our next quarterly events. Past and current speakers include Damian Vaughn, former NFL player, Neil Gregory, Chief Thought Leadership Officer at the IFC World Bank, and many more. To register, visit astroperkins.com and click on Events.
There's almost a new definition being defined in machine learning that is beyond the data warehouse, and it's the training data warehouse, if you will, which I don't like as a term, so maybe we'll have the chance to coin a new one. There's lots of storage buckets within an organization that all contain machine learning training data that a single model could source to improve itself. We've seen these results in the natural language world with GPT models, which are just able to learn from a lot of general text on the internet and build a general understanding of natural language without much curation. The curated version of this would be even more powerful. So if a company that may have more than 100 data storage solutions, is generally one that produces a ton of data. And without having worked in the enterprise field, is sort of staggering to learn how big that is. How much image data an enterprise produces is truly mind-boggling when you look into it. And all of that can be used to contribute to their centralized models. And the role of a training data warehouse is to be able to source it and then aggregate it into single data sets that may point to different sources. And these single data sets all have an objective in common. They can either be to test or benchmark the performance of a model or to train a model. And these can generally be, say, every single production line that is looking at this plastic extruded system product and across the whole organization, perhaps. And then you have one centralized model that is perfect at understanding defects in plastic extrusion, and it becomes an asset to the company that continuously improves and continuously detects these.
Yeah, going back to, I think what you said earlier is really where you guys shine is on the infrastructure side. One of the things you guys have is machine learning operations as a service, which is a very interesting notion. And there, it's really all about uptime, scalability, and throughput, which is quite impressive, where you could potentially run hundreds of models on demand with just one click. Tell us about a little bit more on the infrastructure side, how to actually support that and how that stacks up to some of your other competitors.
We have, we're blessed with some pretty kick-ass developers using Elixir as a backend language. And Elixir has been fantastic. It's generally used for either high-speed trading or telecom. Much of the internet, in fact, runs through it in one way or the other. And it's been great at handling enormous data sets in the millions and tens of millions of images and video. And the same advantages are found in the amount of data that needs to be sent through several models, several GPUs running in real time, and then piping this data back into data sets that then continuously form and enhance the total knowledge of an organization. The advantage to that is that actually turning GPUs on and off on cloud services is still rather a bore. It's not the nicest user experience. You have to go into the settings of each one of them. And instead, we created a control panel where you can start up a model. It will automatically serve a GPU instance for you and then spin it up. And you can choose to automatically turn it off as soon as it becomes idle, for example, which is something that every startup founder in deep learning experiences. You leave a GPU instance on, it's $2 an hour, and then suddenly you're broke. It's $2 a minute in some cases. So they can be quite expensive in high-powered versions. $2 an hour. Correction there. But nonetheless, this is something that's as well emerging in the MLOps sphere, this model orchestration system. And we wanted to create something that was versatile enough to serve every model that is happening on V7 and also allow people to import their own and orchestrate them from there. And I think that it's an exciting one. And something I'm particularly exciting is being able to integrate other models that are found in other services into the same orchestration system and effectively allow them to communicate with data sets that are on V7 so the customers can tap into any potential model hosted anywhere on the internet to label their images or to benchmark them.
Okay. Well, I have more questions, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. So let me ask you about the recent recognition. I think you guys won the 2021 Cogx Award for Best AI Product in Healthcare. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Healthcare is one of our biggest successes in terms of markets that we've been in. It's one that we've committed to. And from a infrastructure perspective, we're HIPAA compliant. From a user experience perspective, we wanted to create the same UX that PAX viewers have. And generally, V7 has seen a lot of success in it. We are by far the better option among the contenders in this market. And to us, it's also super exciting because you get to talk to people who are detecting cancer early, who are building melanoma scanning machines that will create a mole map of you in seconds, who are creating new ways of creating safe surgery for operations that would otherwise be have a mortality rate in the double digits in some cases. And all of that is truly motivational. And when you're in the space that we're in, it's quite cool. You know, every other opportunity that you see around the world, every other success that you see being posted on LinkedIn seems a bit smaller because the mission that or the help that you're giving and the impact that you're having with this system that we're putting together is truly inspirational. We're going to be able to look back one day, and this is one of my goals for everyone who works with us. Look back and say, hey, these have been some of the most fun times of my life, but also some of the ones in which we've really changed something in people's library. Without sounding corny, I think that's truly one of the things we want to do.
Amazing. So on that note, we have been joined by Alberto Rizzoli, who is a co-founder of V7. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks, Scott.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.